They were designed to rule the skies, but for the men inside, they were flying coffins. From engine failures to fatal flaws, these are the Second World War II aircraft that pilots hated most. Messerschmitt Me-163 Comet. This rocket-powered interceptor was more dangerous to its own pilots than to the enemy. It used a volatile fuel mixture that could dissolve human flesh. It was also known to explode during a rough landing. Pilots were essentially sitting on a ticking time bomb.
Breeder BA-88.
Lindsay. This Italian aircraft looked fast and sleek on paper. In reality, it was so overweight that it could barely stay in the air. This was especially true with a full combat load. It performed so poorly that some were stripped of equipment and left as decoys on runways.
Lag 3.
Built out of a heavy wood resin, this Soviet fighter was mockingly called a guaranteed varnished coffin. It was sluggish and heavy. It lacked the power to keep up with German fighters during the early years of the war.
Blackburn Rock.
This British design featured a heavy rear turret. It was very slow and heavy. This meant it could almost never catch up to the enemy bombers it was supposed to hunt down.
Messerschmitt Me-210.
This heavy fighter was notoriously unstable. It was prone to sudden and deadly stalls. It was so dangerous to fly that production had to be halted. They had to wait until its serious design flaws could be fixed in a later model.
Martin B-26 Marauder.
Early versions earned the nickname Widowmaker. This was due to a high landing speed and several tragic crashes during training. While it eventually became a capable bomber, rookie pilots were absolutely terrified of it at first.
Heinkel He-177 Greif.
Known as the Flaming Coffin, this German heavy bomber suffered from constant engine fires. The design coupled two engines together to drive a single propeller. This caused them to overheat and ignite far too often.
Brewster F-2A Buffalo.
While it started as a decent design, it quickly became a heavy and underpowered disaster. This happened when it was weighed down with combat equipment. It was hopelessly outclassed by Japanese fighters and became an easy target for enemy pilots.
Bolton Paul Defiant.
This was another turret fighter that lacked front guns. This left the pilot unable to defend themselves while attacking. Once enemy pilots realized it was defenseless from the front, it became a sitting duck.
Fairy Battle.
This light bomber was already obsolete by the time the war started. It was far too slow and lacked defensive armor. This led to devastating losses during the invasion of France in 1940.
Sarro-Lerwick.
This flying boat was so unstable and difficult to control that it was a nightmare to fly. It had a nasty tendency to dive or roll unexpectedly. This led to its very early retirement from service.
Curtiss SO3C Seamew.
This floatplane was meant for scouting, but it was plagued by stability issues. It also had an unreliable engine. It performed so poorly that many crews preferred to use older models instead.
Douglas TBD Devastator.
This torpedo bomber was hopelessly out of date by 1942. During the Battle of Midway, they were slow and vulnerable. Almost every single one was shot down without scoring a hit.
Vought SB2U Vindicator.
Crews nicknamed this one the Vibrator because of its intense shaking at high speeds. It was slow and lacked protection. It was already considered ancient technology by the time it saw real combat.
Blackburn Botha.
This aircraft was severely underpowered. It also had terrible visibility for the crew. It was so difficult to fly safely that it was quickly pulled from frontline service. It was only used for training from then on.
Caudron C-714.
This light fighter was so underpowered and flimsy that even the French Air Force refused to fly it. It was eventually handed off to Polish pilots, who were forced to face superior German planes in what was basically a wooden death trap.
Heinkel He-162 Volksjäger.
Built by forced labor using cheap wood and corrosive glue, this jet was a disaster waiting to happen. The structural parts often dissolved mid-flight, making it a nightmare for the young, inexperienced pilots who were ordered to fly it.
Bell P-39 Aerocobra.
This design placed the heavy engine right behind the pilot, which caused terrifying flat spins that were almost impossible to recover from. To make matters worse, toxic fumes often leaked into the cockpit, choking the pilot during high-speed maneuvers.
Hawker Typhoon.
This aircraft was notorious for its structural failures, specifically the entire tail section falling off during high-speed dives. It also suffered from carbon monoxide leaks that could knock a pilot unconscious before they even realized something was wrong.
Supermarine Seafire.
While it was a beautiful fighter in the air, its weak landing gear and narrow wheelbase made carrier landings a terrifying gamble. One small mistake often meant the tail would snap off, or the plane would bounce right into the ocean.
Focke-Wulf TA-154 Mosquito.
This wooden wonder was plagued by manufacturing defects and poor quality glue that simply could not hold the airframe together. It became a symbol of desperate late-war engineering that failed to deliver while putting pilots at extreme risk.
Republic P-43 Lancer.
Constant fuel leaks and engine fires made this aircraft more dangerous to its own crew than to the enemy. It was quickly overshadowed by its more famous successor, leaving pilots frustrated with its lackluster performance and frequent mechanical failures.
Curtiss C-46 Commando.
Pilots nicknamed this transport the Flying Coffin because of its tendency to catch fire due to massive fuel leaks. It was a complex and temperamental machine that required constant maintenance just to keep it from falling out of the sky.
Focke-Wulf
WW2 Condor. Originally designed as a civilian airliner, this plane lacked the structural strength for military service. Many pilots watched in horror as the fuselage literally broke in half behind the wings during routine landings on bumpy runways.
Douglas B-18 Bolo.
This bomber was outdated the moment it left the factory and offered almost no defense against modern enemy fighters. Pilots felt like sitting ducks in a slow, underpowered aircraft that was completely unsuited for the brutal reality of aerial combat.
Vultee A-31 Vengeance.
This dive bomber was criticized for its extremely poor visibility and awkward flight characteristics. Pilots found it difficult to handle during the most critical moments of an attack, leading to a reputation for being clumsy and unreliable.
Macchi C-200 Saeta.
While it was stable, pilots hated the open cockpit, which left them exposed to freezing temperatures at high altitudes. Its weak machine guns and sluggish speed meant it was often outmatched by the very fighters it was supposed to intercept.
Bristol Blenheim.
This light bomber was far too slow and lacked the defensive firepower needed to survive in hostile skies. Crews were often sent on suicide missions, where they had almost no chance of outrunning or outfighting the nimble German interceptors.
Armstrong Whitworth AW-41 Albemarle.
This plane had such poor handling and terrible visibility that it was eventually rejected for combat roles. It was a frustrating machine to fly, eventually being relegated to towing gliders because it simply could not cut it as a frontline bomber.
Fairey Albacore.
It was an obsolete biplane intended to replace another biplane, but it ended up being slower and less reliable. Pilots felt they were flying a relic from a bygone era while facing modern monoplanes that could easily pick them out of the sky.